I'm going to teach you three questions and to close deals. And never ask them if they want it because they could say yes or no. How did you go from drumming to the franchise business? And I says, it's easy. It's called drumming up business. And he says, how many houses have you sold? And I looked him straight in the eye and I says, I've never sold a house. I don't sell houses. I sell people. Non-sales tools from the perspective of speaking, it was more like body language, good handshake, looking people in the eye when you talk to them. My dad used to say a guy could lie with his mouth, but not with his eyes. Because even if they didn't become musicians, that right brain development made them really creative in their jobs. You could get everything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. He says it's called being a good servant.
This week on Sweatpants To Suits, we sit down with the legendary Bobby DelVecchio, world-class drummer turned global franchise powerhouse and motivational force. Bobby has backed rock icons like Little Richard and Chuck Berry, then transitioned from the stage to the boardroom, leading franchise growth across 80-plus countries. Now he's on a mission to inspire others to beat the odds in business and in life. Whether he's drumming up for children battling cancer or negotiating international franchise deals, Bobby's life is a masterclass in reinvention, resilience, servant leadership. Bobby, from the backrooms to the boardrooms, how did your journey kick off?
Well, I would say that obviously the first part of my life was the music industry. Got involved in playing the drums and touring with major acts and recording. And somebody asked me the other day at a franchise show, they said, how did you go from drumming to the franchise business? And I says, it's easy. It's called drumming up business, right? Which is a plug for my new book, Drumming Up Business. I'll send you a copy of this, autograph copy.
Yes, please.
So anyways, so I went to the real story goes like this. I had been traveling 80 countries around the world, a lot of jet lag. It's flying takes your toll on you. I think I have more frequent flyer mileage than most pilots do. Um, but it came to a point in my life where I had accomplished what I wanted to accomplish in the music business. And then my daughter was born. And I said, that's it. No more on the road. It's time to spend time with her and the family. And I did a little traveling, but in the very beginning when she was an infant. But as she got to be a year, 2 years old, I wanted to spend time with her. I mean, she was daddy's girl. She was my precious jewel. And I just know it wasn't about business anymore, and it wasn't about money anymore. It was about a relationship with my child. And so that's when I left, but I didn't know what I was going to do. So a friend of mine said, you need to get into the franchise business. He says, Bobby, you're the only one talking on the elevator. You like to make friends with everybody. And I do. I could be in a grocery store, in line at the DMV. It doesn't make any difference where I am. I talk to people. I have that kind of personality, right? And so he says, you should get into the franchise business. First of all, he says, you like people and you'll do them a good service. And when I first got off the drums, I met Zig Ziglar, the motivational speaker. And he says to me, Bobby, so you're a salesman? And I said, no, Zig, I'm not. I'm a rock and roll drummer. He says, like I said, you're a salesman. I said, Zig, with all due respect, I wouldn't know how to sell you something if you wanted it. And he says, well, do you know what the definition of a drummer is? And I says, yeah, a guy who beats the drum. And he says, that's the first definition. The second one is a traveling salesman. He says, back in the 1600s, people would beat the pots and pans. The customers would come running over. What's all that racket? And they would buy the goods. He says, they called that drumming up business. And I patent it right then and there. I have the trademark on it. So that started me on my journey. And I first started in businesses like the fire alarm business, solar energy business, and selling those. And I fast became one of the top international salespeople for big companies, Fortune 100 companies. And somebody asked me once, they says, how do you do it? How have you sold 3,000 franchises in 40 countries? And I says, I'm going to tell you the secret. It's called building relationships. That's it in a nutshell. I remember a guy from Revere, the solar company, went on a presentation with me. He says, Bobby, I got to see what you're doing. You're blowing everybody in the country away. So he went on the presentation. We get in the car. We went to a customer's home, get in the car, and he looks at me and he goes, that was the worst presentation I've ever seen in my life. And I says, really? Why do you say that? And he says, well, you talked for 45 minutes about your kids, about pizza, about music, and the last 15 minutes you talked about the product. And I says, but what was the outcome? He says, well, you sold it. And then he goes, oh, that's how you sell. You build relationships. I says, well, I heard once, if people like you, they'll trust you. And if they trust you, they'll buy from you. And as Zig Ziglar would say, you could get everything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. He says it's called being a good servant. So I kind of took that under my mantra, took that under my wing, and it was about helping people. So I get people into the franchise business. I'm helping them realize the American dream, to have a business of their own. So they have their own clock. Man, I love the business I'm in. I have so much flexibility. I could go on vacations whenever I want. I'm never going to get fired. I own the company, right? So um, it's been such a glorious time in the franchise business, met the most wonderful people and placed many people with granting them a franchise in the business. And I have a good slash bad habit of I won't sell anybody anything that makes under $100,000 a year, because then I call it they just bought themselves a job. So I don't want to sell people jobs. I want to sell people businesses that they could thrive in and make not only additional income, but maybe one day replace their current job. So that's how I got into the business.
Wow. When you started drumming up, right, you had the whole orchestra to choose from. What was
Yes.
it about the drums that called to you besides drumming up business?
Oh, you're going to love this. You ready? I
Yeah.
was two, I was 2 years old and I got polio. I was crippled. I couldn't walk. So my parents were dance instructors for Arthur Murray. And my mom, it being the Italian mom, rubbed my leg down with rubbing alcohol, put me in hot baths, the whole thing, garlic, the whole things that the Italian old school do to try to cure these diseases. My dad took a different approach. He went out and bought me two bass drums, and as I was banging on the drums, he says, "This will strengthen your legs." So the next thing I knew, my legs got stronger. And the next thing was working with Dick Clark at American Bandstand. So I was drumming for Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Bo Diddley, Jackie Wilson, Tina Turner, The Temptations, the Shirelles, the Dovells, the the Coasters, all the greatest uh, rhythm and blues bands that were out there, mostly Motown, of course. But I learned how to keep a beat, how to make it inspiring, how to back up an artist and not just do drum solos later in life, of course. But my job was to keep a strong beat and get the people dancing. And so that's how I actually picked the drums. I didn't pick the drums picked me, so to speak. Somebody says, were you born a drummer? Absolutely. At 2 years old, what are you going to do? But what I learned from that lesson was when my daughter was two, I started her on singing lessons and piano. When my son was two, I started him on drum lessons because even if they didn't become musicians, that right brain development made them really creative in their jobs. My son works for Metaverse. He's one of the most creative engineers they've ever had. And his boss says, "Why is he so creative like that? He's an engineer. He's supposed to be practical. He's supposed to be a mathematician." And I says, "Well, he's a drummer." And they says, "Oh, wow, that's great." And my daughter the same way. She actually got into the music business, one of the best singers I've ever heard in my life. But then again, I started at 2 years old. She had Celine Dion's vocal coach. So she learned from the best. I learned from the best. I studied with everybody. I studied with Buddy Rich, Bernard Purdy, one of the top studio drummers in the world. So I picked up a little bit from everybody. I'd have to say the biggest influence in drumming was drum corps. I was playing with the Magnificent Yankees out of Utica, New York, all Italian bad boys, so to speak. They call us the Sin City Cadets, right? But we were great because we had that passion. And I learned so many rudiments from my teacher, Joe Wormuth, at that time, and Eddie Washburn and Dick Mitchell, two of my mentors. It helped me along the way. I was a young kid. I was 10, 12 years old, but they got me drumming and I never looked back. So when I graduated to the drum set from a snare drum and drum corps, um, I knew all the rudiments. So if I was going to play a paradiddle, um, I would play it with my right foot and my left hand. And no one's ever done that before. So I keep a straight beat, but I was doing rudiments with my feet. And um, I hadn't heard anybody do that yet. So it was kind of my own style that I learned. And then, of course, I studied with the best. Keith Moon from The Who, John Bonham, Led Zeppelin, just Frankie Briggs, who I taught, who later taught me. He was a cousin of mine, absolutely sensational drummer. Both he and his brother, Gary Briggs, started doing drumming too. So we had a musical family. I'll tell you, a big musical family. And it all started with having polio, you know. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And would have to say, God was my saving grace through everything I've gone through. I had somebody come up to me once and said, "But Bobby, you don't understand. I was bullied in high school and my parents used to beat me." And I says, "No, I don't know what you went through. But let me tell you what I went through. I had pneumonia, I had polio, I had cancer. I jumped out of a burning building. I went through a divorce. I mean, I've had my share of obstacles too. But then you got to turn around what I call wipeout, crash and burn in your life. And all of a sudden, you have to turn that into beating the odds. And that's what I did. So I don't want,
Going from that little bass drum that your father bought when you were a childhood to global recognition is not something easy. When did you realize you made it big in the music world?
well, I'll tell you, doing the tour with Dick Clark was probably the turning point in my life because all of these acts, it was during the 60s, so there was a lot of prejudice going on. We couldn't use restrooms, we couldn't use um, the restaurants, we couldn't go in a restaurant. My job was to go get the groceries, bring them back to the bus, put them underneath the bus. We'd pull off the side of the road, pull out the grills, and make our lunch and dinner. So it taught you a lot about life. I mean, I went to college for a few years, but I would have to say I got my PhD on the road. I've met everybody from kings to presidents to farmers to peasants, and people are the same wherever you go.
Wow, that is amazing. You got some great networking skills. And what about that too? Like you traded your drumstick for deal sheets is no small step, right? How did you meet Zig Ziglar? What was the networking that took you to this legend?
He was actually speaking at a convention that I went to. And I met him backstage, and that's when I says, he says, "So Bobby, I heard you were a salesman." And I says, "No, Zig, I'm actually a rock and roll drummer." And that started the conversation. And then I bought his tapes, his videos. I have his whole library, and he started to mentor me and take me under his wing. The funniest part about it is his son now runs the company, Zig Ziglar Corporation, and he wrote on the front cover of my book, Bobby, you were born to win. Drumming up business will unleash your symphony of success. And you can't get a more powerful quote than that.
Wow, that is some amazing features. Holy cow! And
Oh, I
yeah,
called his son to meet him because I knew he was in Dallas. My daughter lives in Dallas. And he says, Bobby, I'm swamped, but I could give you 15 minutes. 2 hours later, I left. He says, well, tell me another story about my dad, because he was just a baby. He was a boy, you know. So, and he and his dad and I were very close because he taught me well. I became international sales champion 4 times for a Fortune 100 company. And it wasn't because I was tongue or I knew how to manipulate or persuade people. Had all, in my opinion, to do with being blessed by God and building relationships with people. And that's it in a nutshell.
in the beginning, you mentioned that you started from a fire, from selling fire alarms to solar energy. So
Yeah.
so how did you go from selling those commodities to becoming like the vice president of Dale Carnegie's institution?
Well, I had had such a great track record selling that to me, you could sell anything, if you've got that personality. And I remember when I started with the fire alarm company, it's a cute story, kind of a devastating story, but a cute story. My first month, I didn't sell one fire alarm. I bombed every appointment. And my trainer said to me, Bobby, I'm going to take you to the Shriners Hospital in Boston, the children's burn clinic. And I went in there, and all these kids were burnt and had hundreds of operations. This one little girl, Susan, 7 years old, never forget her, came up to me and says, Mr. Bob, do you think I'm beautiful? And she had gone through 70 operations, still looked like a monster. She was so disfigured. And so I says, I think you're absolutely beautiful. And I got down on one knee because when you talk to young children, you got to be eyeball to eyeball. You don't want to hover over them. So I got down on one knee and I says, I think you're absolutely beautiful. She says, well, why won't mommy hug me and daddy hug me anymore? And I says, well, they feel that maybe it was their fault and they feel guilty about it, but they love you. I could tell you for sure they love you. And she goes, great. And she reached out her arms and I hugged her and I kissed her on the cheek. And she says, now I really feel beautiful. And it hit me so hard. The next month, I went out in 30 days and sold 38 systems, more than one a day, and became the international sales champion. What changed? My presentation was the same, but I had a heart transformation. And it was something I was now doing to help people, and certainly to help that little girl because I didn't want to see any more people suffer from a fire, being in a fire. So that instilled in me the passion and the compassion to go out and help people, whether it's in franchising or working with cancer children. I teach them how to drum. So cute. They go to radiation and chemo with drumsticks, and they say, Doc, Mr. Bob says we're here to beat cancer, right? And it's given them a hope. It's like a security blanket in a way.
Oh
So
wow.
that's how that all started.
I think he just taught me a masterclass on uh, feeling the need to sell inventions that will impact people. And that is wonderful story. But of all the times that you're working with, there are different people, different people in different industry. How do you talk to these grown-ups? How do you talk to someone in suits? What
Well,
was your networking?
I'm going to tell you what it is.
Yeah.
A guy said to me, I want to hire you to speak to, it was a real estate company. What was it? What's the big company? I forget the
Sutton.
name. What
Sutton?
is
Sutton?
Sutton? Yeah, that was one of them. But in any event, He said, I've interviewed 12 people to come and teach our salespeople. There's about 200 salespeople there. And I said, okay. And he says, what are you going to do different? And he says, how many houses have you sold? And I looked him straight in the eye and I says, I've never sold a house. I don't sell houses. I sell people. He goes, oh, okay. That's a new approach. You're not going to teach them how to sell houses. No, they already know how to sell houses. I'm going to teach them how to sell people. And so I did. I got up there and I talked about why people, what motivates certain people, taught them about eye contact, hand gestures. In other words, non-sales tools from the perspective of speaking. It was more like body language, good handshake, looking people in the eye when you talk to them. My dad used to say a guy can lie with his mouth, but not with his eyes. And that's so true, you know. So I I could talk to anybody that's in the sales business and teach them, as Zig Ziglar would say, Bobby, don't sell people, tell people. If you tell a good story, they're going to probably buy from you because they're going to trust you. And that's been my secret. So it doesn't make any difference. I've sold satellite TV, fire alarms, solar systems, franchises. And you know what? A sale is a sale. And if you relate to the people and they relate to you and they know that you're authentic and that you care about them, there's an old expression, people don't care how much you know, but it's important that they know how much you care. And
Oh,
so, yeah.
so the
So
master work framework is about realizing that, making people realize that you care about them. You care about them, that the product that you are selling to them.
I had a guy that wanted a franchise so bad, and this particular one I was selling. And I says, could I just be totally honest with you? This is not for you. But Bob, I love this. It's not for you. You're not going to make money at this. And I showed him another one, and he got into that business, and he's super successful now. And he thanks me. He says, I don't know what you saw, but thank me for not talking myself into buying that franchise. I says, you would have failed at it because it took a certain skill that you didn't have. And I've zeroed in on the talents you already had. So, yeah, you got to be authentic with people. You got to be down to earth with people.
Oh,
You know, growing up in an Italian home, my
yeah.
dad taught me all about respect. My mom taught me how to be a gentleman. I still open the car door for my daughter. She's 38 years old. I still open the car door because it's respect, you know? And I do that. I do that to everybody. You know, you just gotta love people, you know.
That is amazing. When it comes to sealing a deal, right? First, you make them realize that you make them make the customer feel authentic, right? That your intention is authentic. What's your secret sauce?
I'm gonna tell you what it is. You're
Uh,
gonna laugh. Zig Ziglar taught me years ago. He says, Baba, I'm gonna teach you three questions and to close deals. And never ask them if they want it, because they could say yes or no, right? Or they want to think about it. So here's the three questions. We'll use solar energy. Can you see where solar energy can save you money? Yes. Let me ask it. It's kind of a silly question, but are you interested in saving money? Yes, I am. If you're going to start saving that money, when do you think would be the best time to start? And I get people saying yesterday or today. I never asked them if they wanted it. It was kind of a, so can you see where? Are you interested? And when do you think is the best time to start? Right. And he taught me to only give two answers. If you give them three, they get confused. You give them something or something else. Perfect example. A guy had a chicken farm. He had so many eggs, he didn't know what to do with them. So he opened up a malt shop. And when they would come, he'd say, would you like that with one egg or two eggs? People take the path of resistance. So they said, oh, I'll just have it with one egg. He did 39,000 cases of eggs a week at a nickel an egg and opened up a chain called Walgreens.
Oh, that's how Walgreens started, right?
How they
Holy
started.
cow.
Yeah, funny story, huh?
Oh yeah, very fun. Very
These
fun.
they're all in my book.
Holy cow. You keep a diary of all these successful business ideas, eh?
Oh yeah, I am. I'm one of those guys that documents everything. I mean, that's how you learn. And I would say all of my stories and skills and ways of doing business are all in my book, Drumming Up Business. It says, who's it going to help? Anybody in sales, anybody in marketing, anybody that wants to build better relationships with a twist of music in there. So, in other words, the chapters might be The Good Foot, The Big Bang Theory, role models, ROLL, my role models in life, beating the odds, wipeout. So each chapter has a musical connotation, but underneath it, I write all about life, basically.
Oh. The more I talk with you, the more curious I get. Of all your time doing all this franchising, what have you seen that made people a lot of money? Which industry?
Just about any industry. You could get into any business if you have the skill set or the attitude and compassion for it and make money. So primarily we sell food franchises, but I've sold everything. Dale Carnegie. There was a franchise owned by the band U2 called Qzar. It was a laser tag franchise. It was $1 million for each franchise. I sold 500 of them and put them on the map. So it didn't make any difference what the product was. If you believe in it, you could take it to the limit.
Wow. Any franchise. Holy cow. And drumming up business. Let's just clarify about that too. Tell us about it. Is it a mindset? Is it a method? Is it a movement?
It's all of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah. So drumming up business is a movement. Um, it's somebody said to me once, I was at a convention and there were 500 attorneys there, all women, and a woman judge. And I was invited by the judge. And the lady speaking was the dean of the biggest college here in Florida. And she said, she did her presentation and it was great. She came from nothing and became a judge, right? A lawyer, then a judge. And she said to me, there was a crowd of women around us, and she says, Bobby, I heard you were a motivational speaker. And I says, actually, Mrs. Brown, I wasn't. I'm an inspirational speaker. She goes, what's the difference? I said, well, if I motivate you today, I got to motivate you tomorrow and the next day. But if I inspire you, you'll go on forever. She goes, oh my God, that's great. She said, so you go around, you light fires underneath people. I says, actually, I don't do that either. She goes, you don't? What do you do? I says, I look for people already on fire and I pour gasoline on them. She goes, wow, what a visual. She goes, that is brilliant. I love that.
And for anyone that's listening, right, who wants to be lit on fire, who's ready to turn passion into a profession, how can they reach out to you?
Well, through my website, drummingupbusiness.com. Um, Go online, buy the book. That has all my information in it. But primarily, if they want to speak to me, best way to do it is go to my website and put an inquiry in there. And let's talk about passion for 1 second. I'm going to tell you why passion is so important. We're at the airport. My children, my son's 4, my daughter's 8. And I said to them, we're going to Cancun. We're about to jump on a flight. Go to the bookstore and buy some magazines. My son, who was 4, came back with Popular Mechanics and Popular Science. I went, Sean, can you even read any of this? He says, no, but I find it really interesting. Fast forward 20 years, he worked at Lockheed and now he's one of the top supervisors at Metaverse. And the reason, passion. He was passionate about it. My daughter comes back with Billboard magazine, Tiger Beat, and Fashion magazine. Today she's in the fashion business and the music business. So when they're children, you'll be able to see what they love. As the expression goes, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. mean, somebody said to me, "Are you going to retire?" I says, "When they put the last spike in the coffin, I'll retire." I'm never going to retire. I got too much energy.
Holy cow. Wow. That is amazing. And your book is available at Amazon, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. I'll link it below to the podcast description so
Amazon,
everybody
the
can find it
best way is still to go on
from
drummingupbusiness.com.
your
Because
business.
if they reach out there for the book, I'll send them an autographed copy.
Ooh, wow. There's a special edition. And when you have an audiobook, right? I hope you put in some of your drum beats in there too.
Oh, of course. Of course. I open up every seminar with a drum roll. And that gets everybody sitting down because they go, "What's going on here?"
Wow. It has been absolutely fantastic talking with you, Bobby. You are such an amazing soul. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome.
Sweatpants To Suits interviews the world's most interesting career professionals, uncovering lessons, setbacks, and breakthroughs that shape fulfilling careers. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like, share, or subscribe. Reach out to me on all your favorite social media platforms. Link in the description below.